Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how I do my Kevlar slings. Okay, this is, I was hesitating on making this video for a while, but most of these ideas are my ideas. I've had a few ideas that people have given me to help the sling along the way, but eventually you're going to get a basic idea of how to build the Kevlar sling. Once you learn how to make slings, it's it's just going to be a generalized sling that you make. But as you start slinging and learning how to sling properly, you'll understand that there's some modifications that you'll have to make depending on how you sling and what you like. All these modifications that I've done are for me personally, and it's what I feel like I needed to do to make my sling a better sling and work better for me. Maybe not necessarily work the best for everybody else, but for what I do and for how I throw, this is how I make my sling. Anyways, so we'll get started here. Number one, you need to start out with some Kevlar, and it needs to be 1,000 pound Kevlar. I've taken two pieces here, and they need to be 7'6" minimum. So you could start out with two pieces that are 15 feet long, or you can start out with two pieces that are about 14'6". But 15 feet generally is a good starting point. I usually don't make them smaller than that because you start running out of material. So I start out with two pieces that are 7'6" long, okay? And this is going to be for a 27-inch sling. They're folded in half, and it's imperative that when you fold them in half, you take the rope like this and do a half hitch through the whole thing. Make sure that the middle doesn't move, okay? That way you don't have to worry about it. Now I've tied it into a knot. The loose ends are going to be hanging out. And I'm going to start with these two loops, okay? I'm going to show you how to do the finger loops first and what I do. First thing I do is mark center on these things. So if you don't have them exactly even, you're going to run out of material, and you don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is just take a pen. I'm going to mark center. So I'll mark center out real quick. Now it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but get it as close as possible. Because if you don't have it exactly marked out, like I said, you run the risk of running out of material. And the thing about these things is you're starting from the loops, and if you end up at the bottom and you start running out of material, you're going to be really pissed. So, and make sure you mark it all the way around the string. Okay, this part's kind of tricky, and it took me a while to figure this out. So I don't have a jig. I don't use jigs. I just do a lot of this stuff by hand without using any major adjustments. But you do need a tape measure. You also need a minimum of a 5-piece paracord kit. They're called Fids. You want to get at least the standard basic needles, okay? And you'll see why later. Right now you don't need them, but you're going to need them later when you start doing the cup and the other things. So just the 5-piece basic pouch is all you need. And I'll show you real quick what's in there. So the basic pouch will have a large point, the smaller size point. I don't use this big one. It'll have this smaller one that's made for much smaller paracord. This is more like for the standard 550. And this right here is like basically a giant sewing needle. Okay, I use this, but I only use it to reduce my strands. So basically that's the simple kit that you need right there, okay? So what I do first off is I lap these two strings together. Make sure they're even. I go up about, I'm going to say about 8 to 10 inches up the strings a little bit like this. And make sure, like I said, make sure they're even. Make sure the one cord goes over the top. the other cords on the bottom, and they basically just follow each other. You want this to stay together right here. So first thing I do is I tie this off, basically with a half hitch. Now it doesn't have to be like perfect as you do this. Just make sure you get this knot on here, so because you want to keep it all together. Okay, so I do a half hitch. Now this is the part that gets really hard. It can get hard or it can be easy. It just depends on how you pay attention to how you're doing this. So right now I'm not even. Somehow this got moved, so I want to get this back to where it's even. Okay. All right, so you can see that the strands are even. The top strand goes across the top. This one's not even. Okay. All right. Okay, so you put the simple half hitch on. Now you have the two strands. Okay, so in order to do this right, what you're going to do is you're going to take the first strand on the top and you're going to roll it up. The center mark that I put on there, you're going to put it like this. Okay. Let me check the camera and make sure you can see this. So basically, you're creating the two loops right now on the fingers. Okay. So I did it on the one side. I'm going to do it on the other side. It'll be the exact opposite. I'm going to go underneath. I'm going to roll it up and create the second one. Okay. Now you have the two finger loops basically set. Okay. And this is the part that gets hard. Okay, now that you have that, what you want to do is you're going to take the same string that retains everything. You're going to tie it around one side of your finger loops. Basically, do another half hitch inside the finger loop. As you go around once underneath with both strings. Then back through the other side, okay? Like I said, you don't have to be too concerned about the placement of how the strings are just yet, because you can maneuver them around after you tighten it up. So I'm going to tie these together. Just a half hitch, same thing. Pull it through. Now you got one side that's being retained well, the other side's open. Okay. Do a second half hitch, just to make sure it doesn't move around. So just do a second half hitch right on top of that. Okay. So now you have the one side of the finger loop retained, the other side's open. At this point, what I'm going to do is grab another piece of 95 paracord. This is 95 I'm using right here to tie this with. So now I need to get a 20-inch piece of 95 paracord. So I'm going to grab that real quick. A second, I don't see my scissors. Let me grab my scissors. Not very organized today. Okay, Some guy at my door. It's okay. I'm going to keep going. All right, so for the wrap on the finger loop, you're going to need about 4 feet. Just go a little bit more. I would go like 4'4", something close to that. That's about right. That should leave you with about the right amount. 4'4", 95 paracord. Now, making this finger loop is going to take about an hour, so what I'm going to do is I've got the one side tied. Now I'm going to start on the other side. Okay. So right now I really haven't done too many adjustments, but you basically want these marks that you put on the center lines. You want them about an 1/8 inch away from your first tie. So one side, pull it all the way over to where it's about an 1/8 inch away. The other side, same thing. Make sure it's about an 1/8 inch away from this knot. Okay. Now I've got these 2 finger loops. And what I'm going to do is take the side that's not connected yet. And I'm going to go through here. Take the 95 paracord, run it through both of these loops, pull them up to where they're even, and do another half hitch. Okay, so I'm going to pull this half hitch all the way down. Okay, so you want these even too. So you put your finger here or whatever you want to do to make it even. Pull the 2 pieces of 95 para up and make sure they're even. Okay? So right now I'll make sure they're even. I'm going to pull this side a little more. Because I want this has to be even as well. You try to cut down on waste so you don't have a ton of waste while you're making these things. Because if you make a bunch of slings, in the end it's going to cost you a lot of material, so. Okay, that looks pretty even. Let's see. Oh, a little bit more. Okay, that looks pretty good. Oh, still a little bit more. You need to take your time with this part. I'm gonna blow my nose. Okay, so this is the critical part now. So you got both sides retained basically. This is the general shape of the finger loops. You have to make sure all your ropes are going the right way and everything's sitting in the correct positions. Okay, so this is fairly tight. The first one I did, so remember to set this about an 1/8 of an inch away. Same thing over here. Make sure you're about an 1/8 of an inch away. You don't want these pieces to really move around much because you want this to be right where you want it. Okay. Okay, so this side's still a little bit loose because I haven't done anything yet. And I'm going to start the cobra knot. It's either called a cobra knot or a ring knot. So I've got the 1/2 inch going right here. I always start on the left. I'm going to start my cobra knot. Okay, so I'm going to go here. over the top, back underneath, into the loop, and out. Okay, this will start the cobra knot. Now, this is where it starts getting tight. So once you've started your first cobra knot, make sure you check your adjustment on your ropes again, as it takes 2 cobra knots pretty much to hold it. So if you don't have those 2 cobra knots in yet, you might have some struggling. Okay, so that's close enough. I got about 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch on both sides. So now I'm going to do my cobra knot on this side. It'll be the exact opposite, pulling the loop to the right, underneath, and back up through it. Okay, so this is what it should look like. You should have your retainment side where you did your first knot and your second side where you started your cobra knot. Both sides will look about the same. If you don't like the way it looks, do your adjustments. You can still adjust it a little bit more later, but this is basically how you start the retaining loops. So now I'm just going to go through until I hit a certain distance, and I'll show you that distance. So I'm just going to fast forward real quick through this process because it's going to take a while. So let me just left. I'm going to pull it really tight every time. Right. Okay, I have most of it done already. So this is the thing. For my fingers, it's about 2 3/8 to 2.5 inches long. This new design, I'm going to add a little bit more because the interior rope between my fingers is going to be a little bit thicker than it usually is. Because this new design, I'm actually eliminating one of the knots. So I'm actually going to go 2.5, right about 2.5 inches in length. So I still need to go a couple more. Let's check this real quick. One more knot. All right, so okay, so I got about 2.5 inches. Now this will change depending on the size of your finger. This is one of the parts where, if it doesn't fit you, then you'll have to either make an adjustment, either make it smaller or make it bigger. It's up to you. It depends on what you want to do. I'm actually going to give this one more little bit more space. I'm going to actually set mine at 2 5/8. Okay. Okay, so now you've got the one side done, and you still have the retainment, so it looks like this. Okay. Okay, so now at this point, what you want to do is you want to measure. You want to lay this thing down flat, like that. And you want to measure from where you want your string to work out from. Okay? It's critical that you keep your hand on this one and you pull and make sure that these are straight and flat. The only part that matters is this portion. The rest of this stuff here can be adjusted and twisted later. So I'm going to mark it, but I'm going to pull from this point, but I'm actually going to mark over an eighth over. So whatever you made your finger loop, give it an eighth. So this will be marked at 2 5/8 right here. I'm going to mark this right here. I want to make sure both these pieces are real even because you want them to be exactly the same. So here I marked over 2 5/8. Make sure you can see it. Okay? God damn it, fucking nose. Yeah, it's okay. I'm going to fast forward through some of this stuff. Okay, so now that you've marked over the 2 5/8, which is an extra eighth, what you're going to do is you're going to take this finger loop and you're going to bend it like that slightly, okay? And you're going to grasp everything right here and pull it all through like a slip knot. So keep pulling it, but you don't want stuff to move around too much. You just want to make sure everything stays even. Okay, basically the interior, you want them to stay even. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to pull this and line it up with those marks. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now you want to make sure, if anything, that these marks are up before you do your next connection. You want them slightly above the other finger loop. So right about there, you can see the mark on the side, and you can see where the 95 starts. Pull it just a little bit more like that. Okay. I'm going to give this a little. I'm going to pull this one side up a little bit. Okay. Now this is where it's critical. You want to make sure it's pretty close right here. That looks pretty good. All right, so these finger loops look pretty even now at this point. Okay. Now what you want to do is look at your other cobra knot. Okay. Because basically all you're going to do is continue that cobra knot right up and over this other loop. So my last cobra knot was here on the right. Make sure you follow the same pattern. So I'm just going to follow that same pattern and continue my cobra knot right on through this loop. Okay, so I'm going to go like this. And I'm going to stick it through the same way. Continue the cobra knot. Now, make sure that everything's even as you tighten this up. And as I said before, when you start with one cobra knot, it's not really going to hold anything. So once you got that going, keep it going. There's the cobra knot. Go right on through. Okay, once you've got both cobra knots in on the new loop, it should hold pretty well. It's like I said, it's important not to let anything move around, because if it does, it's going to turn out funny. So keep going on your cobra knot. Back to the right now. Okay. If you have excess pieces that are getting in your way, you can just tie them up higher, get them out of the way, so you don't keep having issues with that. All right, so I'm going to speed. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten this out a little bit right here so I can get a better. It'll be a little bit easier to wrap this last loop, and I'll probably fast forward to this part until I get down to the bottom. So just keep going with your cobra knot all the way down, same direction. Okay, now I'm getting near the end of the cobra knot, or the end of the finger loop anyways. So I really want to get as far down as I can before I take off this retainer. So let me get a little closer. Okay. Close enough now. I'm going to pull this off. Undo both half hitches. Just undo the whole thing. Pull it out of there. Taking all this off. Let's get this out of here. Okay. And we can just take this retaining thing, just pull it down so it's all open like this now. So keep going with your cobra knot all the way up. When you get to this point, you want to make sure it's even. So no matter what happened with your mark, as long as everything's nice and even and everything's pretty much the same, you want to make sure that your spacing is where you want it, because later on, how tight you make this will determine how much this thing moves up and down. If you leave it slightly loose, it'll move more. If you make it exact, it'll be pretty close and it won't move around much. But you also want an even finger loop on both sides, right? So keep going. You can count out the knots if you want, but I usually don't do that. Now, it's not quite where I want it. I want it slightly tighter. And my dots move slightly. It's a little bit more than an eighth now, so I'm not really too concerned about those dots at this point. I'm more concerned with evenness on the rope. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more, and probably that will be it on the finger loop. Now, if you measured it out like I said, you shouldn't have too much extra. 3 or 4 inches is pretty good. You don't want it too small because you won't be able to tension it. So at this point, I pretty much got it where I want it. I'm going to stop right there. Now, if you want to make it the same as the other side, you can do a half hitch and stop it, or whatever you want to do. It's not really necessary. It just depends on how clean you want it and what you want your braiding to look like. So at this point, if you wanted to, you could just do a half hitch across the top here, and it'll look pretty similar to the other side. I don't usually bother with it. It's just another complication on the knotting process. So at this point, you've got it all the way around. You've got one loop, you've got 2 loops. Okay, so if you want to right now, you can cut it and melt it right now, and you'll have a pretty even finger loop. It's up to you. If you want to add another loop or you want to do something else, one less or one more, it's whatever you feel like you think you need to make these even. Okay? That's the basic process of the finger loop. Yeah, if you want to, you can go ahead and you can go across and do a half hitch if you want. You want it to look the same. You can go across like that. And then tie off a half hitch. There. Now it looks pretty much the same on both sides. Like I said, it's not really necessary to do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it. That way my finger loop looks pretty even on both sides. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to cut the rope, the 95 paracord. I'm going to cut it about an 1/8 to 3/16 longer than what I want it at. You don't want to go too short because there won't be anything to melt. So I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to melt that real quick. I just melted it enough to where it kind of bubbles up and gives me a little bit of a grip on the other rope. It doesn't have to be crazy, but you definitely don't want to not do it enough. You want to make sure that it's enough to where it's not going to come through, because there's going to be a lot of force on these rings. Same on this side. 3/16 to an 1/8. Cut that off. You don't have to worry about burning the Kevlar because Kevlar is fireproof, so. But you don't want to over melt it either. Okay? So now you can take your finger loops and check them out. It's a good time to actually put them on your fingers and make sure you did it right. And make sure that these 4 strands are nice and even. So they're even all the way around. Make sure they're even. Like I said, now's a good time to slip it on your finger and see if you got it the right size. But it looks good to me. Okay, so that's the first part. The next part will be a 4-strand braid down the center. You also have the choice of putting in a walker knot right here if you want to stop it. Now, from my experience, 1.25 inches is about the right size. You need to allow a little bit of room for these things to slip around. You don't really want to remove too much, but you want to be able to, things happen and it gets tight, or, you might get it wet or something might happen and it changes the size slightly. You just want to make sure you got a little bit of play in there so that, minimum they slip on over the biggest knuckles on your fingers. Once they slip over that, it's not really going to move around too much. This new design that I have is pretty good. It doesn't slip around too much. So that's the first part, and that concludes the finger loops. I don't know, that took me about, I would say, close to an hour. So there's the first set and there's the finger loops. So I'm going to do more parts to this video here. So I just wanted to show you that one, and then after this it'll be part 2 to the making of this sling. This is my Kevlar sling and the way I make it. Nobody showed me how to do this. I did this all I learned this myself, and this is my original idea. So good luck on those finger loops, and I'll have part 2 real soon.